My name is Todd. I'm your host. Hope you guys had an amazing week. I'm sure a lot of you are on vacation or somewhere cooler than Phoenix, Arizona. We're still out here in Laguna Beach. Blake just got back to Phoenix, and Charles was out here a couple weeks ago. And we are enjoying our summer and trying to be the proper adults that we talk about on this podcast. Soraya, I don't know if everybody noticed, but she got a new haircut today. Look at that. There's the flip. There goes the flip. And then we have a very special guest today on the podcast who is a dear friend I've known for probably 25 years.
That's right.
Good friend who's we play pickleball together. We do this recovery work together. And it's a guy that I really grown close to in the last few years. And I'm very proud to call him a dear friend. But before we get too deep into the podcast, we are going to read the laundry list, which are the traits that we learned as a child and we used as a child to protect ourselves in moments of trauma and discomfort, but that we also take with us into adulthood, which today don't serve us, but we still use them as a sort of as a protection to what we think is fear and trauma as an adult. But we try to get rid of them by doing the work we do that we talk about on the podcast, and then get to a place of relief and tranquility and serenity, which is really the promises that we're going to read after the laundry list. So, Blake, you want to take it away with the laundry list traits?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the laundry list. 1, we became isolated and afraid of people and authority figures. 2, we became approval seekers and lost our identity in the process. 3, we are frightened by angry people and any personal criticism. 4, we either become alcoholics, marry them, or both, or find another compulsive personality, such as a workaholic, to fulfill our sick abandonment needs. 5, we live life from the viewpoint of victims, and we are attracted by that weakness in our love and friendship relationships. 6, we have an overdeveloped sense of responsibility, and it is easier for us to be concerned with others rather than ourselves. This enables us not to look too closely at our own faults, etc. 7, we get guilt feelings when we stand up for ourselves instead of giving in to others. 8, we become addicted to excitement. 9, we confuse love and pity and tend to love people we can pity and rescue. 10, we have stuffed our feelings from our traumatic childhood and have lost the ability to feel or express our feelings because it hurts so much. Denial. 11, we judge ourselves harshly and have a very low sense of self-esteem. 12, we are dependent personalities who are terrified of abandonment, will do anything to hold on to a relationship in order not to experience painful abandonment feelings, which we receive from living with sick people who were never there emotionally for us. 13, alcoholism is a family disease, and we became para-alcoholic and took on the characteristics of that disease, even though we did not pick up the drink. 14, para-alcoholics are reactors rather than actors.
Very good. Well, those are the traits that we had as children and sometimes have as adults. And once we do the work and talk through a lot of these issues, then we get to the promises, which, Blake, if you'd be so kind to read.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is what we get. We will discover our real identities by loving and accepting ourselves. Our self-esteem will increase as we give ourselves approval on a daily basis. 3, fear of authority figures and the need to people please will leave us. 4, our ability to share intimacy will grow inside us. 5, as we face our abandonment issues, we will be attracted by strengths and become more tolerant of weaknesses. 6, we will enjoy feeling stable, peaceful, and financially secure. 7, we will learn how to play and have fun in our lives. 8, we will choose to love people who can love and be responsible for themselves. 9, healthy boundaries and limits will become easier for us to set. 10, fears of failure and success will leave us as we intuitively make healthier choices. 11, with help from our ACA support group, we will slowly release our dysfunctional behaviors. 12, gradually with our higher powers' help, we will learn to expect the best and get it.
Excellent. Thank you, Blake. Appreciate that. I'd like to introduce Gage now, who is, like I said, a dear friend and one of my pickleball buddies that I would call him a semi-pro. He's that good. And Proton ambassador. So if you don't, and Gage, would you mind sharing a little bit of your story? Welcome, first of all, Gage, to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that warm introduction.
Yeah. I can't see you, but I know you're there.
I'm here, yeah.
There's your good-looking face. Boy, you're a handsome man. Gage, tell us, like maybe in like 5 or 10 minutes, a little bit about some of the ways you created the laundry list in your life as a child, and maybe harp on 1 or 2 of them that kind of stand out to you. Like, wow, that one really just stands out to me, you know, and then talk about some of the recovery work you've done and how it's changed your life.
Sure, absolutely. The arc of my story, the impetus is that I was adopted, and I was adopted into a family that was structured, part of the community, and that was good in a lot of ways, from understanding structured life, and then there was some shadow side to it too. And my dad was a fighter pilot. His name was Gage, and he was a big tough guy, and he was an officer. And I learned pretty early on how to behave transactionally, like a lot of us do, that when you're a good boy, you get love, and when you're a bad boy, you don't. And I think for me, the story of my life has always been trying to find safety. And just now, in my 50s, I'm able to look back and really come to terms with the idea that I've been terrified a larger portion of my life than I have ever understood. And by being scared, I've, just done a lot of different things to find acceptance and love. I always knew I was adopted. My parents always told me. So it was always a thread that ran through me and created kind of a difference with other kids. I can remember being young and hearing a story about another family where there were 5 siblings, and one of them suggested to the youngest one that they were adopted, and parents were saying, boy, there wasn't a more mean thing that you could do. And I can remember thinking, I guess that's a bad thing, and I guess that's what I should attach to my understanding of it. So that turned into, fantasizing about my real parents being kings and queens, or telling stories, or making things up, or whatever it was as a very small child, and then just never really understanding it entirely. And when I look back, I can certainly see where my life has been informed by seeking acceptance and validation at a higher frequency than other people as a result of the adoption factor. Statistically, I've heard, and I believe it to be true, that elephants in the wild, when they lose their families, really lose their minds and go behave aggressively. And when an elephant loses its family, the first thing they try to do is find an adoptive family to partner it with so that the elephant doesn't go nuts. I think elephants that have lost their families actually kill more people than lightning globally. So, I don't know. I just mentioned that not because I want to kill anybody, but because it's something that I always just thought, it's okay. I'm adopted. It's no big deal. My biological parents love me. And then I never really looked at it too hard until my late 40s and 50s. And I can look back and see that a lot of my behavior was just really trying to find acceptance from everybody. I think because my dad was a colonel and a fighter pilot, everything came down to rank and work. And, particularly in the military, you have a rank on your shoulder and people salute you or you're saluting somebody else. And it's very structured. So I believe that's the way life was. And I've never have felt unconditionally loved by another human, I don't think, entirely. I've always felt very transactionally motivated to provide and produce and to do things and then say, do you like me now? Or buy a shiny car or a fancy watch or whatever it is.
So if you get good grades, you get approval and love. If you have nice shit, you get approval and love and validation. So it's like you said, transactional, which I like that word. and that's a lot of the laundry list, right? That's a lot of the people pleasing. I'm more concerned about you than me. A lot of the traits go into that transactional way of thinking.
For sure. And then for me, even now, I have a hard time with this idea that there isn't a finish line where I'm judged on what I've accumulated and what I've accomplished. I just always felt that there's some measurement. The house has got to be, 1,000 square foot bigger, and I've got to do the thing, and I've got to get the initials at the end of my name, and there needs to be a comma in my checking account, and all of that stuff, as if someday there'll be an end, and I'll say, look at what I did, and then I'll be lauded. I work hard to live in the moment and be present and to get that thought out of my mind, but it certainly is a really strong current that runs through me. And I think the impetus of that is, my childhood and how I grew up. So as a result of thinking that I was accumulating things, I've always been accumulating things, whether it's like high frequency friends, affluent friends, successful friends, coming home to my mother and father and saying, look, I got a job at GE and I sell MRIs. Isn't that great? Do you like me more? Tell your friends. And, for them, I think, too, there's a generational factor where they live in a retirement community where I'm informed every time I go out there by everything any one of their friends has ever accomplished throughout their life. And it's just not the way I want to live. So I'll go out there and visit on a Sunday, and they'll say, oh, that's Sally, and she used to be an accountant for Arthur Andersen, and blah, 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 blah. As if it means anything, rather than just saying, oh, that's my friend.
And
she's
sorry to interject there, Gage, but that I have to laugh because I had that same experience. Like just growing up, it's like talking about all the people that like had, great jobs, more money, powerful titles, kids that were getting straight A's, whatever it is. That was the talk of the dinner table or stuff at the house.
Sure.
Instead of celebrating the intimacy and the honesty that we're living here, and within our household. We were talking about outside people, outside circumstances.
Yeah. And I can look back now and see where I overlooked a lot of red flags to get that. Oh, well, he's going to be a doctor, or oh, he's going to sell stuff, or he's going to, she's going to have a fancy car. I overlooked really bad behavior and lived a very dramatic life. I can remember being in college on Saturday mornings, and we'd wake up early and we'd all get on the phone, 5 guys, and we would compare our Friday night. And it was just who could outdo the other from a dramatic perspective, as if being dramatic and drank the most and hit balls off the front of the driveway down through the neighborhood, won the program. And I spent years like that and didn't know that I should be maybe measuring people and things in my place in this world differently. That's what I had to accept. A good example. My dad, we lived overseas for a long time, about 10 years, and he really liked to drink wine. And I can remember being in the dining room and counting more wine bottles than people at almost every dinner. And this was before the internet and before you could usually save things. So, of course, we had to soak the wine, get the label, the ones that he liked, and put them in a book. And it was so ingrained in me that I have to make alcohol part of my life. I have to learn how to incorporate it into a functional a way. Nobody ever said you don't have to do it. And I wish they had. I wish that I'd had an example or maybe some motto where somebody said, you don't have to go down this road. Alcohol for me ultimately became unsustainable. I abused it. It revealed itself.
If I wasn't at the solution for a while, like I know for me, when I was in like fear or panic or trauma, alcohol became the solution, No question. And it's just like, it was the solution until it didn't work anymore.
No question. I mean, I worked for General Electric for years, and we had an annual pilgrimage to Chicago for a global sales convention called the RSNA, and we had often 2 dinners a night where we were challenged to find wines to pair with dinner that maybe the physician we'd included hadn't heard of, so that they would remember us over the other competitor that was also taking them to dinner in that week. And we had classes in wine. We had a suite at the hotel that we stayed at that was always open. with alcohol service. And I can remember, hitting that convention floor the following morning thinking, booze is just oozing through my pores. But didn't I connect with these physicians last night at the bar at 3 a.m. in a unique way to sell them something other than, the technical attributes of an MRI? And, that's the way it was for years and years and years and years.
So, we talk, and Soraya's going to, jump in here, but we talk a lot about living in fear for most of our life, living in fear. And how do we get out of living in fear? What are some of the things that we do to tell the truth in a relationship instead of being a people pleaser and a codependent? How do we start doing things that we want to do instead of like worrying or thinking about others first? How do you break through some of these things in relationships and for yourself? I know we do a lot of recovery work and we do a lot of call it talk therapy with each other, where we try to get out of the stuckness of the fear. How do you do some of those things?
Well, for me, I align myself with like-minded people that are interested in recovery in the same frequency as I am. And that really makes such a difference for me. Just our group is so significant and it's such a safe place that allows me to go out into the rest of the world and face people who haven't found recovery. I mentioned this the other day to you, but I struggle with how to communicate the fact that I am in recovery to people and be very honest the way I'm open and honest about it all of the time. And I told somebody that I play tennis with extensively that I was in recovery and that I had challenges in fear department and alcohol consumption, growth, and I'm trying to evolve. And he looked at me like I was out of my mind. And he said, I would have never thought that you had any kind of a problem at all. And I laughed to myself and thought, boy, there are days where I'm falling apart inside and this guy thinks got it all together. So how do I do it is I don't spend a lot of time with people like that as much. I mean, I might play tennis with them, but then I kind of come home to safety with you guys and we talk open and honestly and we're vulnerable, right? Because like Brene Brown says in her books, we connect through vulnerability. And I think I spent years and years and years, whether it was a fancy suit or a shiny thing, thinking this is how I'll attract connections that I'm looking for. And then I got the connections that those attracted, and then ultimately they were unsustainable, whether they were relationships with women or other men or what have you. So now I try to measure authentic connection, by telling the truth, being vulnerable. I think that as an adopted man, I've always been looking for that and just didn't know how to source the idea of it, how to articulate it. ACA has really provided for that for me. I always knew it. I didn't know that I knew how to put it into words or how to live in the construct of it. But there are moments and days where I'm just so pleased to have found it and so happy and so...
Yeah, it's freeing. I mean, to be vulnerable and connect on people's fears and vulnerabilities and shame and saying, Gage, I'm really feeling like I'm beating myself up today. I'm really judging myself. I'm feeling a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, and a lot of anxiety. And I just want to tell you about it. And here's what's going on. By me just doing that, it like relieves half of the burden right there, And then you might give me some tools back that like are helping me feed it, whether it's like, why don't you go into some meditation? Why don't you like do a mantra? Why don't you go out and exercise? Why don't you, tell yourself, no, you're not a piece of shit. You're not doing these things. You're a great person. You're a child of God. I love you. You should love yourself. Whatever the tools are, but just opening up about it is not wearing the shiny suit. Like everything's great. Look at me here. Look at my new rims and my new shiny suit. We're talking about real, deep, intimate emotions.
Absolutely. The other frequency of peace that it's brought is the sense of community that I've had living here for years, where my girlfriend has an ex-husband, and years ago I would think that his behavior was something to gossip about and say, judge him and why he's wrong. And ACA has provided my ability to remind myself every day that the hardest people to love need the most love, and that narcissism is born out of shame. It's a shame-based construct.
You have empathy and
Yeah,
compassion
empathy and
now for
understanding.
people that are struggling out there and showing it through maybe narcissism or material things or whatever. You have some compassion and empathy and love for those people now.
Correct. And I mean, I look back at the years of my life, that hours and hours I spent trying to posture and talk to people about how I am smarter, I have more integrity than that person, or how I compete with them on, I'm a better man, and I don't have to do that today. I can be at peace. So just so thankful to have found ACA and you guys.
Thank you. We appreciate it. And, we feel the same way. Soraya, do you want to ask Gage some questions and share maybe a little bit about your experience with some of the topics here?
So I don't know if you knew this, but I was actually a foster kid from 13 until I was 18. And I ended up being long-term fostered by my grandparents, who were retired cops. And my grandmother was a warden for a juvenile detention center. I think that my biggest struggle growing up, and something that I still have a hard time with, is privacy. I find that I can still be pretty secretive about things because I didn't want to get in trouble with my family, because my family was crazy strict. They're all police officers. They didn't know all of the things that I was doing. So I learned to be ridiculously sneaky. And I find myself as an adult hiding things from people when I don't really need to. Do you find that you struggle with keeping secrets? I mean, I know that your family was...
I do, and I almost feel, I don't know, it's interesting. I feel very disconnected from them, and I just always have put it in the perspective, it's the blood. The blood's different. Because I was treated in ways that just aren't in my heart by my family. So, yeah, absolutely, I would hide and I would sneak and I would present a version of myself that might be 50% off, 60% off, certainly in very bad ways that I didn't want to be caught. And I think a lot of times I would do bad things just to get away with something that I could own and keep and control, as opposed to saying, oh, you're right, I'll do everything you tell me to do. Particularly the military. I can remember we moved 17 times before I graduated from high school. That's a lot of moving. I can remember thinking, Dad, why don't we go to church at every place we move to? We only seem to go to church at places we move to where you have high visibility on a military base. And, his answer to that was, that's how we present ourselves. And so it never made sense to me. And then it did, right? You just present yourself as a certain way. So I thought everybody had secrets. Everybody had kept things to themselves, so we could all live in this construct of everything's fine. I'm great. You're great. Everything's great. Look at us. So now being able to tell the truth and live more authentically certainly has brought peace that I didn't know how to find as a child. So I can certainly empathize and understand.
So how do you feel that in your recovery, how do you feel that you assessed your secret keeping behaviors, and how did you acknowledge them and learn to be freely yourself?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I have a tendency, I guess it's just bloated ego. I think everybody should be on the path of recovery that I'm on because it's brought me so much peace. So if I can, a friend of mine drank the other day, got in his car, and I can just kind of really get aggressive with him and say, this is completely, there isn't one good thing that could come out of this. You're living with your hair on fire. Nothing but bad can come of it. And so that's an extreme example, but just in ACA and recovery, I've gone to my family and read some of the book, and the reactions from my mom, bless her heart, have been not understanding, right? So talking somebody else into the idea of me needing to get it off my chest to feel better is out the window. So another good example of that is in my 50s, I found my biological mother and my biological father, and it was all my initiative. And I flew to Denver, Colorado, and I went to her house and I knocked on the door, and her mother, my grandmother, said, please come visit me. So I went to visit her, and she was in a nursing home. Then I went to visit my biological mother. And on her doorstep, she literally said, I want nothing to do with you. Beat it. I don't know why you're here. I don't know what you want. I don't know why you went to see my mother. And I can remember standing there, and I was, sober for years and years, thinking, boy, this would be a good time to have a drink. But when I got home and I thought about the whole thing and the way I handled it, I realized that I never needed to do any of that in the first place. Like, a lot of it is like a Lifetime movie where you think, oh, they've been looking for me their whole life, and there's this love that I can't otherwise source, and it's so special and unique, and it's a mother and child's bond, and I'll be made whole in a manner that I don't know how to understand now. And then I came back and it never happened, and I thought, God, that was a waste of time. I didn't need to go do it. I mean, I did to understand that it really wasn't important in the first place. It's not an ABC movie week. So I think, like, if I had to conclude this podcast immediately, I would say the relationship with myself is what I've always been looking for. That if I get the relationship with myself correct in an understandable way, everything's going to be fine. I don't need to be in love
and
with a girl.
to interject there, Gage, it's like whether we're adopted or we're not, I think it's pretty easy to abandon ourselves and rely on other people to give us love, validation, and approval. And they're not going to be able to give it to us. As little kids, we get it from them, and it's necessary just for survival. Eat, shelter, just that even if it's just a little bit of love, we need it as survival. But whether we're adopted or we're not, it's like, it's so important to give it to ourselves. That's why on the cover of the ACA book, it says, the first page, it says, become our own loving parent. And, what does that mean? To me, that means everything I wanted as a kid, 4, 5, 6, 7, I can give myself today as a 55-year-old adult. I can give that to myself through the tools that I've enabled. So Blake and Charles, you guys know Gage really, really well. Why don't you give him some tough questions, because I've been giving him some softball ones.
Uh-oh. Here we go.
Go ahead, Blake.
No, Charles, you're the softball guy.
You'll throw the hard balls.
Wait a minute. Is that a cat you have with you? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Can we see the child?
This is Max. So everyone's got their pet. I saw Blake has his dog. I see Todd, of course, has Gigi. I got a cat, but that's not the topic of this. So, Gage, I wish I wanted to be there in the studio with you. Mm-hmm. I enjoy you thoroughly, you know that, and it's been grateful to get to know you both in recovery from our dysfunctional upbringings as well as being competitive out there on the court. So I always appreciate your honesty, and I see a lot of similarities in us in putting on such a fantastic exterior, right? Maybe people will think that I am actually better than I feel. Were there things that you would often do to kind of get validation, get approval from others to, kind of fill that void or hide from certain different aspects? Do you have examples of that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for years it was make enough money to tell people to shut up and sit down. Yeah. Right. I don't need to take your advice. I can remember my dad was the kind of guy that would call me on a Monday and catch me at home at 3:00 and say, why aren't you out cold calling? When I sold medical supplies door to door to doctors' offices. And I can remember when I made a particular amount of money when I turned 32, and I called him and I gave him the passcode to my bank account. And I said, take a look at that number. And because of it, I'd like you to never give me advice again. And, I regret doing that, but it was all like when I was a kid, he would sit at the dining room table at dinner and go through the checkbook and complain about every check he wrote. It was terrifying. I can remember when I thought tires were $25, so $100 to replace tires on a car. And this particular time, it was $150. And he just went on and on and on. It was terrifying. And I can remember thinking, I never want to be that guy. Well, as a result, when I made money, I would put it in the bank and I would hoard it. I wouldn't spend it. There were times where I was cheap and I didn't like myself. And I thought, why am I behaving this way? I have more than I need. And
So that behavior
Yeah.
growing up
it's just
caused you
terrifying.
to
Yeah.
like hoard your money
hoard-
and
yeah.
not spend it because the fear that you're not going to get any more.
Yeah,
Like you might
this
run out.
isn't going to last. This is over. I need to cling to it. And then a result of clinging to it, you know, I lost it in the stock market, or it went upside down in relationships, or with homes, whatever it was all bad from that perspective. So it was like, you know, hoarding and then losing it as a result of not knowing how to be smart about it. So those are good examples, Charles, of how I would present to tell people to, you know, shut the fuck up. I've got this. Look at me. I work for General Electric. I sell MRIs.
Look at this suit.
Yeah.
Look at the rims on my car.
Yeah.
Have you seen the rims on my car? Do you know who you're fucking talking
Yeah.
to?
And if you don't like these, here's the one that's coming. You know, here's the one I'm working
Gage, you
for.
took it a level further too. It's like, here's the actual digits. Here's the actual fucking amount.
Yeah, here's the amount.
Look at this.
Don't
You're
ever.
going to love me now? You're going to love me now?
Yeah, exactly. Will you love me now?
Yeah, in a different way, in a way you respect, as opposed to being, you know, just ordered around all the time. So
Isn't that interesting though? This is how you were trying to get admiration or attention or love from your father, was by showing numbers.
I used to print, and this is not a lot of money, but I used to print my stock portfolio and put it on my fridge. And I lived in a house that cost 65 grand that I bought when I was 17 in Tempe at ASU. And my friends would say, maybe you should buy another house. And I'd be like, no, it's important that, you know, I have this piece of paper to show people when they come into my home what's happening. I'm reminded of that by some of the fellows that I still know from that time. They're like, remember you used to print your stock portfolio and put it on the fridge?
Yeah, you're not going to put it on your fridge if no one else was going to see it, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
You're not going to drive a Range Rover or fancy suits if no one else in the world's going to see it. We do it because we want other people to see us and think how cool we are. And like, I think, Charles, you said it, so we can act, we can feel, or would you say we can look better than we feel? I think you said.
Yeah.
We can look better than we feel. I like that, because I know my self-esteem's low, and the lower it is, the more I'm trying to show off and shine my stuff, you know?
And then we find things, we source things to inform us that it's okay, like fake it till you make it.
Right.
Like dress for the job that you want to move up to. Like all of those things inform us, whether it be movies and dysfunctional love at first sight isn't a trauma response to childhood issues. And just the idea of love at first sight, how ridiculous, right? But we all think that's the holy grail of connection and what we should be looking for, when it's not. So now, having a strong foundation, I'm able to see those things, where at the time, I believed all of it. I was the one that needed to conform to these things, you know? And watch me go.
Blake,
look at me adapt. Yeah.
Blake, how about you? You got some questions for
I think my biggest question for Gage would be, you know, all that being said about your childhood, how do you try to operate differently in and around relationships or romantic relationships? Because that's a big one for me is, you know, it's carried on into romantic relationships for me. But what are some tools that you do, or things that you do, or things that you're aware of, you know, that you're doing differently now than you have previous?
Well,
I think that was a wiffle ball, Blake.
Well, as a wiffle ball, yeah, I think just being aware of the red flags. One of the things a couple of things that I try to do. I try not to judge my partner's behavior by my values and integrity. I don't try to climb in their head really necessarily and understand why they're doing things from. That's not what I mean to say, but it's real easy to walk around and point the finger and say they're not doing what I would do in that situation. And it's different to have empathy and understand that maybe as a result of their childhood or their lives or their previous relationships, they're going to react to a situation that is entirely different than the way you would react. But again, at the same time, you know, a bloated ego. In this ACA recovery, I come home and I share the ideas and the expectations and just think, don't you love that I'm able to enlighten you with all of these great solutions that have brought me peace? Don't you want to come on board with me? Let's go. I've always believed that if two people work toward making a relationship work, that you can make it work. And that just isn't the case for me with, interpersonal relationships across the board. As much as this guy that drank last week got in his car and I break out the story for half an hour of why it was such a bad idea, and I expect him to embrace me and say, "Oh my God, I didn't see it that way. Thank you so much. I'm never going to do it again." He pushes back and says, "Well, it'll probably happen again." And I think, wow. So just being aware of those things, and then in the same vein, believing people's behavior when I see it and not trying to change it so that they curb how they are, who they are when they see me. So I guess a shorter version of saying that is, believe what people do when they do it. I didn't always feel that way. I didn't always do that. I had a college roommate just passed away from alcohol, and I look back and, oh man, just the things that we fought over, the things we enjoyed, or the way we spent our lives. He was a close friend, and so many of the things that we spent time and energy on just amounted to nothing, and some of the great joys weren't celebrated enough. So I just now at 57 years old try to leverage my age and remind myself that I'm in constant evolution.
Yeah. We were talking about that this morning with some of my friends here. We were talking about how what I'm doing is right and what the other person is doing isn't right, because it's what they're doing is right as well. It's because it's our perception of our reality. So there is no like I'm right, they're wrong, and there's no like they're right and I'm wrong. It's like we're both right because we are interpreting our reality the way we're interpreting it. And just because we're on this recovery journey and doing the work we're doing, this is a way that we find peace, harmony, and structure and self-esteem through our work. But it doesn't mean that someone else who's not doing this is wrong, right? Mm-hmm. And like you said earlier, which I love, Gage, is that, you talked about how you have empathy, compassion, and love for people that are acting out, whether it's an authority figure or someone who's like in self-pity or someone who's braggadocious, whoever, whatever their thing is, like you have love and compassion and empathy for them because you know what that feels like because we've been in their shoes. And I love that, I love that we don't have to judge them and gossip about them today. We could actually pray for them and hold them in a high regard with love and healing, right?
Absolutely.
It's a beautiful thing that you said.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, guys. Well, anything else before we start to wrap it up?
Well, we did just launch the Laundry List website. So you can find us online at thelaundrylistpodcast.com. Cool. It's got links to all of our social media, all of our wherever you can find your podcasts. And then as well as a message center where you can send us an email directly. So
thanks so much for that information.
And what's the email if people want to send us an email directly?
The email is going to be thelaundrylistpodcast@gmail.com.
The laundrylistpodcast@gmail.com.
Soraya, has anyone taken us up on buying them a book?
They have not yet. I have been patiently waiting by my mailbox for a request for a Red Book, and I have not gotten any yet.
Well, we sent, I know we sent one to my good friend in prison in Mississippi, and he greatly appreciates it. But we are willing and able and looking forward to sending out these Red Books to anyone that wants to know what we're talking about here on the Laundry List. And it's a beautiful Red Book. I have them wherever I go. Here it is. Beautiful copy.
That is beautiful.
It's very thick.
Gorgeous.
We'll sign it for you and we will send it out. So please take us up on it. Comment, give us feedback, rate us, watch us and listen to us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, wherever you get your podcast. And if you want to come on, let Soraya know. She will schedule you on the list. I think we're like 3 or 4 weeks out for guests. And have a great week. Be nice to my friend. Thank you, Gage, for coming on. We really, really appreciate your honesty and vulnerability and all the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Also,
it
thank
was
you
a
for
privilege to be
playing
here.
pickleball with us and being so nice to us.
That's right.
And as my friend Morris says, thank you for being nice to me. Really, thank you.
Yeah, I love you guys. Privilege to be
So
here.
yeah,
Thank you.
let's close her out with have a great week. We love you, and just try to be nice to yourself today. That's the name of the game.
Mm-hmm.
No shame, no inner critic, no people pleasing to yourself. Let's be gentle and kind and loving towards ourselves. I just got a tattoo that says forgiveness, love, and kindness. And it's mostly towards myself and towards others, but mostly towards myself. So thank you, Gage, for coming on. We'll check back in with you in like 6 months.
Sounds good.
We love you lots, and we'll see you next week on The Laundry List.